Chapter 45. Arrogant false witness. According to the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbour, Exodus 20:16, Deuteronomy 5:20. The primary reference is to courts of law and testimony therein. In courts, an oath was required of all witnesses, that is, an oath invoking the judgment of God for false testimony. The framers of the U.S. Constitution held strongly to the necessity of an oath based on faith in the God of Scripture. Quote, otherwise, there would be nothing to bind his conscience on. End quote. For many years, courts could reject the testimony of an atheist or agnostic on the grounds that he could not validly take an oath, or if allowing the testimony warned the jury that the man's testimony could not be backed by an oath. This commandment also calls for honest speech among men. What can false witness include? It does require honesty. To cite an example, among one people, a child of 5 can ask to be included in a game played by children of 10 and 12 years. He cannot play the game, but his request is never denied, with the result that the game breaks up. False witness is made to the child of 5, namely that he can compete in a game with older children. Another example. Years ago, I came to know somewhat a dying boy genius whose heart finally gave out in his teens. As a child, the family, with reason, expected great things from him. Their pity when his bad heart ended even his schooling very early was great. The boy's abilities were versatile. At chess, he could defeat very able men. But pity led the family to indulge the boy's whims and tantrums, and from a happy boy, he went on to become a problem and a burden. The family had borne false witness to their son. Such instances of false witness are many, and in diverse spheres. For example, in the 1996 presidential campaign, one speaker was sharply condemned for racism because of a reference to Chinamen rather than Chinese. There was no ill will on his part. At one time, Chinaman was as correct as Englishman is now. In some parts of the United States, similar older usages still prevail. Was it not false witness to level unwarranted charges against the man? Another example. A black mother filed a complaint with a Stockton, California school district because a widely used and respected older novel referred to, quote, African Americans, end quote, as, quote, darkies, end quote. Investigations followed. Such incidents are commonplace. In the Friday, November the 29th, 1996 record, the Vice President of the Associated Students of the University of the Pacific, Stockton, California, wrote an in-house memo meant to stimulate discussion. With all kinds of racial organizations on campus, why not one to focus on the American Caucasian race and their culture and achievements? He was at once the target of hostile comments and criticisms by the self-styled voices of the 43% of the university's students. They receive 82% of the club funding from student activity fees. False witness exists in such incidents in many ways. Not all, quote-unquote, minority students agree with the stands taken by groups acting in their name. Some are greatly embarrassed by the bigotry they see manifested in such episodes. But, across the spectrum, we see a variety of self-appointed spokesmen speaking for a particular class or race, for women or men, for, quote, sexual minorities, end quote, and so on and on. One is reminded of the incident in 17th century England when 3 or 5 tailors issued a proclamation which began, "We, the people of England." Such arrogance is routine now, and it is false witness and should be called so. Routinely, churchmen speak as though they are the voice of all the people, when the people are ignorant of what is said in their name. It is possible and also mandatory to speak in the name of the Lord when we speak in absolute fidelity to His word. We can and must say, "Thus saith the Lord, thou shalt have none other gods before me." Deuteronomy 5:7. It's a sin not to say so when the occasion requires it. But where does God speak about a minimum wage law or about subsidized housing? Who speaks for me? And whom do I speak for? How is it that in an, quote, age of democracy, end quote, we have more demagogues than ever, all claiming to speak for more and more of us? Democracy has led too many to overweight numbers and underweight truth. Is it that where numbers win elections, numbers overrule truth? Clearly, perjury is less and less a subject of legal penalty, and perjury has become routine in courts of law. Where God and his law are no longer primary in a society, there is a shift to pragmatic and man-centered considerations. Then, too, Pilate's old skepticism again comes to the fore. What is truth? John 18:38. A society begins and ends in false witness if its cornerstone is not Christ. Its focus apart from Christ is on man, so that it begins with a premise that is false. Most peoples, races, and nationalities are today too prone to self-pity and to demanding a favoured place in the sun. Each sees itself as a kind of church, a holy vessel before which history should kneel and give reverence. None other gods is foundational to the Ten Commandments because, apart from that premise, we falsify all things, and not only our words, but we ourselves become false to the core. The sad absurdities of the two Stockton episodes cited above are no worse than what we all exhibit constantly when our lives are not God-centered, for then false witness is basic to our nature.